Assalamu alaikum. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi at-tayyibin at-tahirin. نويت التعلم والتعليم والتذكر والتذكير والنفع والانتفاع والإفادة والاستفادة والحث على التمسك بكتاب الله وسنة رسوله والدعاء إلى الهدى والدلالة على الخير ابتغاء وجه الله مرضاته وقربه وثوابه سبحانه وتعالى. Alhamdulillah. So inshallah, we'll continue from where we left off in our session of tafsir that we have every week. And so we reached Surah Al-Balad, and inshallah we'll continue from there, inshallah. So Surah Al-Balad is the surah that follows Surah Al-Fajr. Surah Al-Balad, translation, the surah, the land. Balad. Al-Balad means land. And the scholars say that this surah is Makkiyah, meaning that it was revealed in Mecca, and its verses are 20. It has 20 verses. So we'll go over some of what the surah talks about in terms of content, and then we'll So the scholars, they say that this surah is Makkiyah, and there are scholars that say that there's a Madani component to it. There's some difference of opinion that some scholars say that it's from Medina, revealed in Medina, except for 4 verses. So there's difference of opinion regarding that, but the majority say that it's a Meccan surah. And we went over briefly what a Meccan surah means. It means that it was revealed in the early period during the life of the Prophet ﷺ, during his period when he was in Mecca. No?
Balad has different meaning.
Al-Balad.
We understand balad means balad where we live. Al-Ard is different. Land, Arab.
Al-Ard, earth.
بس balad مش land. نحن هيك إلا إذا كان له تفسير ثاني.
Al-Balad means land, but here which land is it referring to? Just tafsir. It's referring to a specific land. So right now we're in the land of Canada. America is a land. The Middle East is land. So land can be specific to the property that you own, for example, the land, or it could be more expansive during the country that you live in. It refers to land as well. So ala hasab. So the surah takes its name from the beginning of the first verse. قال تعالى لا أقسم بهذا البلد. لا أقسم بهذا البلد. So this is where the name of the surah is taken from. There's the word al-balad in the first verse. And then so the first 4 verses, they mention 2 oaths, and it's followed by discussion of the state of the human being. And a lot of the surahs in Juz Amma, they talk about the human condition, the human behavior, how the human being tends to behave in times of difficulty, in times of ease, and the inclinations of the human being, what the human being is inclined towards, whether it's evil, whether it's good. So it talks about the human condition, the first 4 verses. And then after that, there is some blame laid upon human beings for failing to realize the nature of their condition and failing to put the faculties, the capacities that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave them and their possessions to proper use. So it's going to talk about how the human being, despite the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given him many different sustenances and has given him many fast facilities, has facilitated many different things for him. But despite that, the human being, he doesn't use what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave him in obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Rather, he uses it for other than that. Either for his own personal And so he is negligent and forgetful of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the human being is blameworthy for that. Because whatever we have, whatever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us, we have to remember Him in that thing that He has given us. And whatever He withholds from us, we have to also remember Him in that as well. So if He gives us something, if He's generous with us, then this is an opportunity for thankfulness and being grateful to Him subhanahu wa ta'ala, and this is a must. And if He withholds something from us, He prevents us from something, then this is a test from Him subhanahu wa ta'ala, and in that the proper way for us to respond in that is with patience and being steadfast in remembering that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, whatever comes our way is from Him subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so Allah gives whomever He wills and He withholds from whomever He wills. And in all cases, the person has to return to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in all of his affairs. And this is the beauty of the believer. In the hadith, in the books of the scholars of hadith, they mention a hadith from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, "Ajaban li amri al-mu'min," that the affair of the believer is ajab, is ajib, strange. If he is, if gifts are given to him and bestowed upon him, Allah blesses him, then this is, and he's thankful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for that, then this is good for him. And also if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala afflicts him with hardship, this is also, and he's patient in that, this is also good for him. So regardless whether the human being is in a state of ease or in a state of difficulty, it's still good for him. So with hadiths like this, we're reminded by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and by the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam that the end affair for the believer is always good. It's always a happy ending for the believer, inshallah. Whether he's in difficulty, whether he's in ease. Because ultimately the state of this world is a temporal world. It is a limited time that we have in this world. And al-amru bil khawatim, and the affair is by its end. How does one end his life? So the believer who ends his life in belief, regardless what happened to him in his life, this is a happy ending for him. Whether he was going through difficulty, whether he was going through ease, whether he was between the two during his lifetime, it's a happy ending for him. So عَجَبًا لِأَمْرِ الْمُؤْمِنِ, the Prophet ﷺ said in the hadith. So that's the next section of this surah, that it talks about how the human being is, he fails to realize the state of his condition and the things that Allah has given him, the faculties and the properties and so on, and he fails to use it properly. So that's from verse number 5 to verse number 11. And then after that, from verse 12 to 17, there is instruction as how a person should act in different scenarios, in different situations. When he's met with poverty, or when he encounters a yatim, an orphan, and how to conduct oneself in such a situation. So those verses, they talk about that, verse 12 to 17. And then the surah ends off by making mention of the companions of the right and the companions of the left. Ashabul Yameen wa Ashabul Shimal. Ashabul Maymanah wa Ashabul Mash'amah. And so this is the general layout of the surah of Suratul Balad. And if we look at the other surahs that have preceded, generally the theme of Juz Amma is around these issues, the issues of the human condition and how the human tends to react in different situations and how he should react as well. So that's what Surah Al-Balad is about, and what a lot of the surahs in Surah Juz Amma talk about as well. So now we'll dive into the surah and we'll look at each verse on its own, inshallah ta'ala. قال الله تعالى لا أقسم بهذا البلد. So first verse, I swear by this city. And the scholars, they said that what's referred to al-balad here is Mecca. The mab'ath or the mahbit of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the birthplace of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wa alihi wa sahbihi wasallam. Also the place where he grew up and the place where he lived for 13 or so, where he lived for the early part of his year, and he stayed there after prophethood for 13 years. So this is what's meant by al-balad, is referring to Mecca, al-balad al-haram. And it's a sacred city, it's a holy city. Yeah? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala declared it as that it's a holy city. And the Prophet's presence there makes it even that much more sanctified and that much more holy. The Prophet having been born in Mecca makes the city that much more holy and that much more sanctified. And Mecca has many distinct characteristics that make it different from other cities. And the people who perform Hajj and Umrah, they experience this as well, that there are certain things you cannot do in Mecca. While you're in the state of Ihram, or even when you're not in the state of Ihram, there are certain things that you cannot do in Mecca. And also Mecca, as it is well known to all of us, is the Qibla for the prayer. Wherever the believer is on earth, he directs himself to the Masjid al-Haram, he directs himself to the Kaaba. So that's what's meant by al-balad in the first verse, La uqsimu bihadha al-balad. Okay. And then the following verse, قال تعالى وأنت حل بهذا البلد. And you, O Muhammad, are free of restriction in this city. And the interpreter he says, Mufassir he says, أي ومن المكابرة أن مثلك على عظم حرمتك يستحل بهذا البلد يعني مكة كما يستحل الصيد في غير الحرم. So the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, as we said, was born in Mecca. And so by him being born in Mecca, Mecca becomes even more holy than it already is. And the Prophet has special rights in Mecca that others don't have. No. And the following verse, قال تعالى وَوَالِدٍ وَمَا وَلَدٍ, and by the Father and that which was born of him. And the scholars, they say that the Father here refers to Adam, and that which was born of him refers to his progeny. And so Adam is our father. If someone says, who's your father? You say Adam. You're not lying, because Adam is the first human being. All the human beings, they came from Adam. So from that perspective, he is the father of all human beings. He's the first human being Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created. And from him came all other human beings that are on this earth and that are alive today and that will come to live until the Day of Judgment. So all of them are from the progeny, from the children of Adam alayhi salam. قال تعالى in the following verse, لَقَدْ خَلَقْنَا الْإِنسَانَ فِي كَبَدٍ, and we hardship. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in this verse that He created us and decreed for us to be in states of hardship and difficulty. And that's the meaning of fi kabad. And the hardships that the believer faces in his lifetime starts from the very moment he's born, from the very moment he exits the womb of his mother and enters into this world. The hardship starts from that moment. In the womb, it's a confined space for him. It's a different world. So when he exits, he starts to cry. There's pain in that for him. When he exits the womb of his mother, he experiences pain. And then he experiences other pains as he grows up as well. He experiences pain when he's circumcised. He experiences pain while after he's weaned from breastfeeding. He breastfeeds with his mother for many months, and then after that he's weaned, meaning that his breastfeeding is interrupted. He's prevented from breastfeeding at some point, and that's a hardship for the child. But the hardship doesn't stop here; it continues. And then as he grows up and he gets older, his mind develops. He starts to be possessive. This is mine. You can't take this from me. And he starts to claim things for himself. And then he enters, and then he is introduced to a teacher or a guide. And then now if he does anything wrong, he has to face the interactions of a student-teacher relationship, where if he does something wrong, he is reprimanded or he is blamed. And in some places, they might hit the child as well in a way that doesn't harm him, but that's still a hardship for the child. It's difficult. And then he grows up. And mind you, this is just some of the difficulties that's being mentioned here. He might encounter sickness. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala might afflict him with a sickness as he's growing up. So that's a hardship as well. And then he also experiences the hardships of growing up with the parents, because the parents, they won't stay quiet for if a child does something wrong, or if he's trying to do something that he doesn't understand is wrong and he thinks it's okay, but in actuality it will harm him. So what does a parent do? Stop that. Or you dare do that again, you'll see what happens. So he's going through different stages of difficulties in his relationship with his parents, in his relationship with his teachers. So this is another form of hardship. And then he gets older, and he reaches puberty. And he now is in a different phase of his life where he experiences some level of independency. He wants to be more independent now. When he reaches that age of puberty, and he also starts to engage and interact with people of the other sex, right? So the male would interact with the female would interact with the male. So he's growing up. So there's difficulties along the way there as well. And then he gets married. And then at that stage, more difficulties. He incurs more difficulties. And then he has a child. And then as he's progressing in life and going through these different phases and stages, his body is getting stronger and stronger. It's going to reach a peak, and then it's going to decline. And that peak might differ for people. Right? He's going to increase in strength and strength and strength until he reaches a certain stage and level, and then he's going to decline, and his body will experience weakness. So there's stages. There's difficulty in that as well. So he experiences more migraines, more headaches, he's more sensitive to the heat and the cold. He's more sensitive to the words of people, for example. And then after he's going to reach 50, for example, where he is, as if he even lives that long. Where now he's in need of the help of other people. That's a hardship of its own as well. And then he dies. So then this is the marahil, the different phases that the human being goes to in his life on earth, in his temporary life on earth. And then he enters into the barzakh. And the barzakh is a totally different world. And so there's the questioning of the angels in the grave for some. And so this is some of the meanings of لَقَدْ خَلَقْنَا الْإِنسَانَ فِي كَبَدٍ, that we have certainly created man into hardship. And in the following verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, أَيَحْسَبُ أَن لَّن يَقْدِرَ عَلَيْهِ أَحَدٌ. Does he think that never will anyone overcome him? أَيَحْسَبُ أَن لَّن يَقْدِرَ عَلَيْهِ أَحَدٌ. Does he think that nobody can overcome him, nobody can overpower him? And the Mufassir says, لبعض صناديد قريش الذي كان رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يكابد منهم ما يكابد. And so this verse was revealed to some of the heads of Quraysh, the disbelievers of Quraysh, who the Prophet ﷺ would experience much difficulty with them. They would harm him and they would give him a very difficult time. And so that's one of the interpretations of the surah. That they say it was revealed with regards to a specific individual, but also from a general perspective, it can include much more than that. And so, if we take it that it means it was revealed with regards to a specific individual, it means that that individual who's giving the Prophet ﷺ a difficult time, think that nobody can overcome him, that nobody can overpower him. Does he think that the day of judgment would come and nobody will have power over him, nobody will overwhelm him, overpower him? Does he think that? So that's the specific interpretation with regards to individual that was revealed. But it could be more general as well. And does a human being think that nobody can overpower him and nobody can overwhelm him? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the creator of everything. He has power over everything. So it's in the best interest of the human being, specifically the believer, to bear in mind that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has power over him. So in all aspects of your life, you have to remember, it's important to remember that Allah has power over everything. With regards to your wealth, Allah has power over that. With regards to your health, Allah has power over that. With regards to the different states and affairs that you find yourself in, Allah has power over that. So He can give you and He can take away from you. Tabarak wa ta'ala. And then the following verse, قال تعالى يقول أهلكت مالا لبدا. He says, I have spent wealth in abundance. And the word here used is lubada, which is the plural of lubda, which means abundance. And the following verse, قال تعالى أيحسب أن لم يره أحد. Does he think that no one has seen him? Huh? Does he think that no one sees him? And that's significant because for the believer, at least, if he is constantly remembering that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sees him, then he would avoid many things, would be careful in many different situations that he finds himself in. But it's when the believer doesn't remember that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sees him that he ends up disobeying Allah, or he enters into a state of heedlessness. He's heedless, ghafla, and he disobeys Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And those who have reached high stations in piety, they reach those high stations because they're in constant awareness that Allah sees them. So it goes both ways. That when a believer is in constant awareness that Allah sees him, then he will worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in a more perfected manner. And if he is oblivious and totally not aware of the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sees him, he doesn't summon that to his heart, he's not aware of that at all times, then he enters into a state of heedlessness. He's heedless, he's in a state of ghafla, and this is when he is more prone to sinning and disobedience, and the shaitan enters into the picture and leads him astray as well. So this remembrance of that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sees one is very, very, very important. And it's a way that the pious predecessors, they raised their young children upon as well. That they incorporated in their upbringing of their children that remember that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sees you wherever you are. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sees you wherever you are. And so when they grow up in that state and they're aware of that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sees them wherever they are, then it won't be hard for them to worship Allah as if they see Allah, as mentioned in the hadith. And so also they won't fall into disobedience like those who don't remember that Allah sees them fall into, because they're in constant remembrance that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is seeing them. أَيَحْسَبُ أَن لَّمْ يَرَهُ أَحَدٌ. Does he think that no one has seen him? And then in the following 3 verses, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes mention of the ni'am, the endowments that He has bestowed upon the human being that remind him of his Creator, and that remind him that he is weak and that he is in need, and that without these endowments, the human being would not be able to live his life the way he lives it, and would not be able to function properly. And even we find that in ourselves. If even the slightest thing goes wrong within ourselves, it makes everything difficult. If you have a migraine, for example, or headache, it's not the same as if you did not have it. It's not the same when you don't have it, right? or you have a specific pain in your leg, for example, or you have we have a condition in your skin, for example, that causes you to scratch it a lot, for example, whatever it may be. If there's something that goes wrong within our body, it makes it that much more difficult for us to live our life. So these are endowments Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bestows upon the human being. قال تعالى أَلَمْ نَجْعَلْ لَهُ عَيْنَيْنِ. Have we not made for him two eyes? Did we not give him two eyes? Allah didn't give us one eye. He didn't give us three eyes. He didn't give us 10 eyes. He gave us 2 eyes. Tabaraka wa ta'ala. 2 eyes with which we can see what's around us. We can see the form of things. We can see the color of things. We can see the expressions on the faces of people. We can see danger coming from a distance. We can see different things in this universe with the 2 eyes that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us. وَلِسَانًا وَشَفَتَيْنِ, and a tongue and 2 lips. And have we not given the human being these different blessings and endowments and faculties by which he can obey us and be aware that we see him, that Allah Ta'ala is addressing the human being here. وَلِسَانًا وَشَفَتَيْنِ, and a tongue and 2 lips. Allah didn't give us 2 tongues, He gave us 1 tongue. He didn't give us 5 lips, 4 lips, He gave us 2 lips. And the interesting thing is He gave us 1 tongue and 2 ears. Not 1 ear and 2 tongues. But how often we use the tongue, sometimes more than we use the ear. We use our tongue more than we use the ear, our ears. Sometimes we talk more than we listen or pay attention. And they say that on the Day of Judgment, the organ in which the person will find the most sins, the most transgressions, is his tongue. Because the tongue, despite its small size, it's put people under the ground. It's been a cause for the death of many people, because of their tongue. They spoke when they shouldn't have spoken, or they remained silent when they should have spoken. It's the tongue. And also the tongue is the instrument by which people do ghiba and tale-bearing, namima. It's the organ by which people cause other believers to fight amongst each other. And so that's an example of people who use the tongue in disobedience to Allah. But also the tongue, if used correctly, properly, in obedience to Allah, is an avenue for great reward for the believer. And they say that the organ by which a person will find the most reward, an organ which is the cause for a person to have the most reward by using it, is his heart. They say that in the Day of Judgment, the organ that will cause the human being much distress because of the amount of sin that he committed with it is his tongue. A lot of sins are committed with the tongue. And the organ in which the believer or the believer in the hereafter will find much reward because of is his heart. The heart is the organ in which the person, the believer, will be astonished on the Day of Judgment by how much rewards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given him because of the deeds that he has done with his heart. So these 2 things we have to protect greatly, the tongue and the heart. And this on the verse, قال تعالى وَلِسَانًا وَشَفَتَيْنِ, and a tongue and 2 lips. So the tongue, not only does it allow us to speak, it allows us to eat. It's a very important, it plays a big role in eating. In moving the food around when you chew. Also, the lips play a big role in the food that you consume and the drink that you drink as well. So these are endowments from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the following verse, قال تعالى وَهَدَيْنَاهُ النَّجْدَيْنِ, and have shown him the two ways. And the two ways are the ways of good and the ways of evil. In other words, the pathway that leads to paradise and the pathway that leads to hellfire. The human being in this life is shown both ways. And Allah ultimately, eternally knows which pathway each human being will choose. Allah ultimately and eternally knows that. But Allah created within the human being the faculty of will and the faculty to choose which of the two ways he's going to take in this life. So the Najdain is the pathway referring to the pathway of good and the pathway of evil. And so the people of paradise, they do good deeds that lead them to paradise eventually. And the people of transgression and disbelief, they take a pathway in which they commit lots of sins and disobedience, and that eventually leads them to hellfire. Na'udhu billahi min dhalik. And the interesting thing is that the human being many times usually ends up dying in the state in which he spent most of his life in. And we ask Allah to make us of people who spend most of our lives in doing good in khair. So if he spends most of his life in doing good in khair, praying, fasting, sadaqah, visiting his relatives, keeping ties of kinship, and so on and so on. You know, all of the good deeds, there's a lot of them. Reading Quran, making dua. He spends most of his life doing that, then many times this is an indication that he will, inshallah, die in that state, the state of khair, the state of belief. And then they say that if a person spends most of his time in shar and evil, disobedience, haram, disbelief, gambling, fornication, lying, all the haram stuff, the major haram stuff, and so on. He spends his life in that pathway. They say that many times he'll end up dying in that pathway, on disbelief or a major sinner. So that's why it's important to habituate ourselves with practices, good practices. And habits are only a person only accustoms himself to a habit if he does it repeatedly. So, if some of us wonder, for example, I'm not donating a lot, for example, I'm not reading a lot of Quran. You have to habituate yourself in that before you can actually do a lot of it. And it's gradual. A person has to be diplomatic with himself, right? Because ourselves, a lot of times, when we want to do good deeds, the Prophet ﷺ told us in the hadith, خَيْرُ الْأَعْمَالِ أَدْوَمُهَا وَإِنْ قَلَّ. That the best of deeds are those that are persistent and consistent, even if little. So, what a person ultimately wants is to be able to take on a good deed and do it within a capacity that he can maintain it and stay consistent in it. Right? Because we don't want to be like those, one-hit wonders or, short-lived bursts of energy and then we die out. No, you want to be able to take on something and maintain it. How do you do that? You start small. If you want to engage in the salah and the Prophet ﷺ, you see yourself not doing it on a consistent basis, daily, for example. Take a small number and do it daily. Take 10, for example. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. That's it. Sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. 10 times each day, for example. And then if you think to yourself, you say, how am I going to do that 10 times? When am I going to do it? I'm too busy. And you have to think a bit more. You say to yourself, what's the deed that I always do every day, regardless of my situation? Whether I'm happy, sad, weak, strong, tired, lazy. What's the deed I always do every day? My 5 daily prayers. So now what I can do is I can insert making salah on the Prophet after each prayer 2 times, for example. Such that I'm able to uphold saying it 10 times each day, and you keep on doing that for a period of time, and then you see that now that becomes a habit, becomes second nature. You won't leave it regardless of what happens to you. And then you add to it, and then you add more as you go along. So what the message is that the human being, the person has to be diplomatic with himself, meaning that he has to take small strides without harming himself, meaning without leading himself down a pathway of hopelessness or having that feeling where he's not able to do it, for example. Because yourself is like the vehicle that you have. Okay. If you overburden it, what happens? It gives up. But also if you're too lax, you don't accomplish anything. So you have to be between 2 extremes. A person has to be between 2 extremes. Not too lax and also not overburdening himself. And every person knows himself. Every person knows himself and knows what his capacity is. And so he has to take on what he can of acts of worship according to his capacity. And you don't measure your capacity by looking at someone else and say, oh, this person does that much, I'm going to go do that much. You have to know your capacity. No, فَلْيَتَنَافَسِ الْمُتَنَافِسُونَ. Yes, let them compete in khayr, but only you know what your degree of, or your capacity is, of khayr that you can consistently do, following what the Prophet ﷺ said to us, that the best of deeds are those that are done in consistency, even if little in amount. And there's rare situations where a person, he lives most of his life, this will be the last thing I'll say inshallah today, as it's very rare, it's only a rare situation where a person lives his entire life, or most of his life as a believer, in doing good deeds on the path to Jannah, and then at the very last moment he disbelieves in Allah Ta'ala and he dies on disbelief, thereby becoming cast into hellfire and it's in very rare situations that happens. And also it's very rare situations likewise that a person would spend his entire life in disbelief and then at the very last moment he enters belief, although this one is more common than the first. And then the scholars, they say that the reason for that is because of there must have been something he was doing in his life that was a cause for su'ul khatimah. Nasallallahu ta'ala al-afiyah wa salam min dhalik. That there was something that he must have been doing in his life that was a cause for a bad ending. And the scholars have talked in length about the different things that can cause a person to, the different things that a person might do that might be a source of, that might be a cause for him to have a bad ending. And so we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to keep us on the path of khair and good that leads us to paradise inshallah, where the ultimate enjoyment and the ultimate happiness is. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect us from following a path that leads to hellfire, a path of disobedience to Allah ta'ala, or a path of disobedience that's not followed by repentance. All of us know our shortcomings in obedience to Allah Ta'ala. We know our shortcomings, whatever it may be and wherever it may be. But we also want to be people recognize the sin that we've done or disobedience that we've committed, we quickly turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and ask for His forgiveness, because ultimately He is the one who forgives subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we'll stop here for today, inshallah ta'ala. So we'll say Tahleed 3 times and Salat al-Prophet. La ilaha illallah, La ilaha illallah, La ilaha illallah, Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallim. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallim. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. رب اغفر لي وللمؤمنين والمؤمنات، رب اغفر لي وللمؤمنين والمؤمنات، رب اغفر لي وللمؤمنين والمؤمنات. وجزا اللهم عنا سيدنا محمد خيرا. بارك الله فيكم. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله.